Okay, perfect. Welcome back, everyone, in the R&D track. Yet another expert class. Here today, we have Robby Wauters from imec.istart with us. He'll tell you guys a little bit more about the challenges that come with building an AI startup and why it's easy and not so easy. But first of all, thank you all for being here,
Yeah, you're welcome.
Robby. And then, yeah, first off, who's Robby and
I'll
what is he
I'll, I'll
doing?
jump right in. I'm Robby Wauters. I'm a venture acceleration manager at imec.istart. But let's rewind a bit. I've got a computer science background from the KU Leuven, and about 10 years ago, I started at iMinds as an innovation engineer with a simple goal: save the Flemish media sector. It was not that successful, but in the meanwhile, I also co-founded a startup with some colleagues of mine, and we got selected in the imec.istart program back then. By now, I'm at the other side of the table at imec.istart, and I'm a venture acceleration manager, which means that I'm coaching and evaluating tech startups inside the program. And next to coaching those startups, I'm also responsible in a team for connecting those startups with research institutes and universities. And of course, one of those research institutes is imec. So imec is the world-leading R&D and innovation hub in nanoelectronics and digital technologies, with its headquarters in Leuven. And if we look at imec as a company, we see mainly three different structures, three different units. The biggest one is, of course, R&D. They collaborate with big international players. They also have a number of innovation services that they offer. And at the end, we have the venturing unit. So that's where they connect and support startups. And next to imec.istart, I also want to mention imec Expand. imec Expand is more like a traditional VC. They invest bigger tickets into startups, but they only invest in startups where there's technology or IP of imec inside. imec.istart, on the other hand, is mostly the first investor and supporting partner to scale your tech startup. We have an open program. That means that we can invest in any startup that's out there. But of course, we limit ourselves to tech startups. So if you're a bakery or a butcher, then that's no use to come knock on our door. And what we offer is a 12-month program where we help you with funding, with facilities, and coaching to help you scale your business. And we have last week we did an announcement that we raised capital in our fund. So I'm proud to say that we now have 30 million plus in our fund, thanks to our fund partners that you can see on this slide. And what we do is we bring tech startups that are past the initial ideal, which means that they have an initial team, that they have a working prototype, and we bring them to the point where they can get money from investors. They get first commercial connections with clients, and they're really ready to grow. And we do that by our program and our investment fund and our pre-seed investment of 50 to 250K. And that program consists of a number of building blocks. So you can see it as things you can add, and of course every startup is different. So we can offer them, and it's up to the startup to choose which is more vital and when to take that. And the first one is access to coaching. And so I mentioned that I am a venture acceleration manager, and we have about 10 of my roles in the team, and we coach tech startups on a daily basis. So we advise them, we help them with anything that they want. Is it a business model? Is it revising their investor pitch? Or is it an emotional phone call at the end of the day because there's something wrong within the founder relations? It's all there. And next to that, we also offer a lot of workshops. We have over 25 workshops that we offer to our tech startups and are given by external experts. And next to that, we offer, of course, access to talent, which means that we help them attract new people into their team. We introduce them to investors. We introduce them to corporate partners that can be, of course, potential customers or partners for them. And we even guide them to be more international or internationally active. And I'm proud to say that by now we have over 200 startups in our portfolio with an exceptional high survival rate. So you can see that we have over 80% in survival rate, which is quite amazing in the startup field. And also a number that I would like to highlight is that our startups by now have created over 200,000 jobs, which means that they're forming a critical mass, and it's very good, and it's nice to see that and be part of that. But let's switch topic a bit and let's dive a bit deeper into AI. Let's focus on AI for a while. And the interesting thing is that there's some discussion on what is AI. So let's first define what is artificial intelligence. And I would say that if artificial intelligence is a number of techniques needed to simulate some kind of intelligence in computers. But of course, we're talking about intelligence. So what is intelligence? And we can wrap it up more or less in one sentence. And it's the ability to collect information, translate that information into knowledge, and apply that knowledge to achieve a certain goal. If we look at that rather abstract definition of artificial intelligence from a technological point of view, things will get a bit more concrete and specific. So you can see that every computer science technique that fits any of these three actions actually fit the bill of AI. So it's really an umbrella of different techniques. And if you look at collecting information and translating it into knowledge, you can compare it with our senses. So vision, hearing, smell, touch, etc. Our brain captures information from our senses, and a model and a pattern in our brain converts that into something useful. So if you look at a headline of a newspaper, it's a pattern in your brain that really makes meaning out of it. And if we look, for example, at the computer side, how computers do this is they also have sensors, they also have inputs. So it's microphone or a camera. There is also input there, but there are just meaningless ones and zeros. And so computers also need those patterns or models to create meaning out of this. And one example of this is computer vision. So computer vision is a computer science technique that is being used for analyzing and categorizing objects or persons in a certain image. And next to that, if you want to analyze audio and create meaning out of sound of audio, you'll need audio processing. And if you want a computer to see and understand what a certain line of text means, then you'll need natural language processing. And then there's a whole bunch of different techniques that all fit those the AI term. And that makes it a bit difficult. Of course, it's a bit confusing when everybody's using AI and sometimes they mean entirely different things. And internally, we use this at imec.istart as well. So we have a lot of AI startups, but we look a bit deeper, and we look at the different types of technologies that are being used within those startups. And it's important to connect the relevant startups to each other. So a robotics startup is something entirely different than a recommendation engine that media companies use. And that's why it's relevant to look under that AI term or under the AI hood and look for the real driving technology. I'll talk in the next 10 to 15 minutes about the major challenges that I think and I've seen that AI startups are facing that normal software startups aren't facing. And we'll begin with the cloud is great, but it can be very costly. And a term that's often being used is garbage in, garbage out. AI often needs humans more than you would think. And AI also doesn't age very well. And there can be a struggle if you look at differentiation and IP. But first, cloud. I think the cloud is amazing. It's the storage and compute power that anyone with an internet connection has access to has been an innovation driver in the past. And the global cloud providers such as AWS or DigitalOcean make it relatively easy for companies to host and to start a software business and an online business. And the rise of online software businesses, especially software as a service business, has exploded in the last 5 to 10 years. To illustrate it, in 2020, the average person uses about 36 cloud applications every single day. And most AI startups look like normal software businesses, as they also rely on code to interact with their users, but there's something special in the center, at the core. And that core is a number of AI models. And those AI models are trained with data. And training an AI model with a lot of data or with very computational intensive techniques can be very costly when you do it all on the cloud. And if you look at training your model with just text, that's one thing. But if you need a catalog of images or with sound, or even worse with video, then it can be something else, and it can be very costly, and it can be a real limiting factor on your scale or on your business model. So that's why it's important for a company to have decent expertise in your team, to set up a decent cloud architecture, to look at cloud operations and cloud deployments, to make it useful and to make it worthwhile, and to have a business model that eventually works. And so we talked about having a lot of data and that it can be costly, and the overall look in the eye of data is the more the better. But the term garbage in, garbage out is often used in AI, and means that if you have very bad quality data, the result of your AI system is probably worthless. So that doesn't only mean that you need a lot of data, it also means that you need good quality data. And in order to have good quality data, it should be correct, it should be validated, and it should be structured in a good way. And one way to do that is, of course, using humans to do that. And what a lot of people don't know is that AI actually needs more manual intervention than you would think. So we talked that having good quality data means annotated data is a vital process in building an AI system. And you need people to say what is relevant and what is the ground truth before you can learn or give that data to the AI system to learn, which of course is a timely and costly process. And popular AI-driven services such as Uber, Pinterest, or Expenditure, they all use on a consistent basis humans in the loop when you think about AI services. So Amazon has a so-called crowd tasking platform called Mechanical Turk, and that Mechanical Turk name is derived from a contraption from the 18th century, where a big puppet, like a big chess table with a puppet behind it that looks like a Turkish merchant, hence the name, the Mechanical Turk. And it was a chess machine that would combat or challenge emperors and kings that would gloriously beat them. And it looked like it was an autonomous puppet beating all of those real humans. But in the end, it was actually just a small professional chess player inside the box, inside the desk, that was playing chess and was beating those kings and emperors. And likewise, the Amazon service offers very small tasks to humans to do things that AI actually aren't very good at. So the difficult cases, the edge cases. So chances are very high that the next time that you scan your expense note or scan your parking ticket is that some random Mexican guy earned just 20 cents to analyze the content and to help the AI system with what you're hoping to achieve with that. And it looks like a bad thing, and it's like demystifying a bit the AI bubble, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing, because early stage startups, especially AI startups, can use this in their advantage. They can use those techniques and having humans in the loop to bootstrap their model or even fake their product. And that's a good way to think ahead and look forward and do it with minimal resources. I also want to talk about AI over longer term and looking at the health of an AI. So the last few years, everybody knows that there are a lot of job openings for data scientists, and there is a big demand for them, AI experts, data scientists, etc. And the big plan is here that those bright minds come together and they create fantastic new systems that solve new problems that couldn't be solved before. But from what I have seen in the past is that those bright minds are primarily occupied with cleaning data, collecting data, and modeling data before they can even dream of creating an intelligent system or a learning system. But once that the data scientist team has a reasonable amount of information and actionable knowledge, they can use ML techniques, and they create as a first model, and then they iterate upon it so that the accuracy is high enough to persuade their management or their client. After that, the model is brought into production, and that's it. Real data is coming through, and new results are being calculated or predicted along the way. And most businesses and most projects stop there. But actually, very few AI projects go beyond those first deployments and first models. So they don't ask themselves, is my model still as accurate as 3 months ago? Is the data that's running through my system, is it still, is it good quality? Is it coming through as I wanted? Do you have a feedback loop with the end user, and is that improving my accuracy? And in most cases, it's not enough. There isn't enough attention to keeping that AI system healthy and performant along the way. And luckily, there are a number of tools coming on the market for AI startups and AI businesses to help them with this, and to have a look and monitor performance and accuracy of your system. And one of those systems is a portfolio company of ours called Raymond.ai, and they have a platform to monitor performance and data quality with a few lines of code. And that's a nice example of the next wave of AI startups that will come, that will really need to have an eye on AI health, especially if you have multiple models across multiple client deployments. And the last thing, or the last challenge I want to discuss here or talk about is IP and differentiation. Because in the AI world, it's a bit different. Technical differentiation is often a bit harder to achieve than you would think. Most new model architectures or new systems are being developed or conceptualized in an open academic setting. Reference implementations such as pre-trained models are often available as an open source online commodity, and model parameters can even be optimized automatically. So you can't ask yourself, what is my IP? What makes my company different from yours? And furthermore, some would say my data is my real IP, and data is the core of an AI system. But it's often owned by customers, or it's in the public domain, or it becomes a commodity over time. And some customers will not allow you to create a new model or train your model based on their own data. So that means that you will need a custom data set, you will need a custom data model for every single client, which practically limits your scale quite a lot. And that's something to have an eye on. To tackle this, there are some techniques that are being developed, and they're called privacy-preserving machine learning techniques. And imec has published an article or a paper a few months ago called Privacy-Preserving Amalgamated Machine Learning. That's a solution to tackle this challenge. But in the bigger terms, it can be a problem to defend your IP or to really make your company stand out in this landscape. And to summarize, I want to run over these challenges one by one again. So the cloud is great and it makes your life a lot easier, but you'll have to think because it can be very costly along the way, and especially on the long term. If you have bad data, or if you have a lot of data but it's not good quality, then things won't look very good for you. AI needs a lot of manual intervention, but it can be a good thing as well. You can use it to your advantage to bootstrap your business. And if we look at the longer term, I would say you need to pay more attention to the health and the performance of your system. And at last, I think we all need to think about how we make our company or our project more stand out more, and talk about our IP and how can we define and protect our IP. And to wrap up, I want to thank you for listening. For every startup out there, every tech startup out there, I just want to mention that our call is open for the 1st of June, so our deadline is 1st of June. Every new tech startup that's looking for support and funding can go to our website for more information and can apply there. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them right now.
Okay, great, perfect. Thank you for the interesting keynote, Robby. And indeed, definitely check out the application form of imec. First off, I wanted to, before we dive into the AI technology itself, I wanted to learn more about, like you mentioned, you had a startup of your own.
Yeah.
What was it about?
Oh, it's not easy to explain, actually. It was a hybrid gaming startup, which means that we want to combine what the trend in board games. So we wanted to be around the table, but at the same time use an iPad or a digital screen as our interface. So we would make an interactive board game on an iPad, more or less.
Okay, perfect.
To bring people around the table instead of everybody at the same at their screen at home. That was really the option or the goal that we had. Yeah.
Okay, great, interesting. But that company is.
It wasn't too successful. Let us say that it was a good learning school.
That's the most important thing. Okay, great. Moving on. You also mentioned you have AI, but it's still really broad. Like you mentioned, you have the ML models, the computer vision, the NLP that's booming right now. Because you have a great overview of all the new technologies being developed by all the startups here at imec.istart, what's the application you see most right now, and which is the technology or the application you see that's most promising for the future?
I think what I see is it's a real trend in the term digital twin, and it can be used in various sentences. So it was first coined as a digital twin of a city, for example, meaning a digital copy that runs in sync a real copy of the real world. And we see that in every topic. So we can see it for shipping companies. So we have a digital twin of a boring platform, or a digital twin of a person even. So we see health tech startups looking to digitize everything from a Fitbit tracker to your heart rate to what you eat. We have ingestible pills in the future that will have even more data on your person and your health. And I would say that digital twin is like the new term and the new hype to follow. And it all falls more or less under the term AI.
Okay, to really make sure that you can predict everything there is
Yeah,
about you,
because
about the
especially in
shipping.
these COVID times, for example, if you have a boring platform and you have a digital twin of that, you don't need to send the chopper if you want to fix something or you want to see if something wrong, because you have a good copy, a digital copy that you can see what's going on. If we change that, what happens, and that's a yeah a cool trend to see actually.
Okay, great. Yeah, and of course, building digital twins sounds easy, but you need, of course, a lot of computing power for that. So that way we have a nice bridge to the cloud computing you, of course, mentioned. It's a great opportunity, of course, for startups that they can utilize the technology available now of course, the big giants of an Amazon, an IBM, a Microsoft. But what are some of the difficulties they're facing there? Is it a good choice for them to immediately go to one of the giants because they, of course, they have the computing power, but also all the other models readily available for them, of course, to use? Or is it also interesting for them to maybe have a look at, okay, maybe we can get our own server for some applications or make use of maybe smaller scale server farms?
Yeah, maybe two things on that. First of all, we see a lot of companies going to all the big players.
Yeah.
So we see AWS, we see Azure, we see Google Cloud, DigitalOcean, IBM. There's no like one real champion winning the race. So every startup picks their own, and everyone has their own pros and cons. It is rather enticing to jump in a cloud model because a lot of things are being done for you. And if you want to just see what your application does, or if you want to let your AI model train with minimal effort, you can do that on a cloud provider. But of course, if you don't configure it correctly, if you don't have the expertise in-house to know what the impact is of a certain change or a certain training mechanism, it can really bankrupt your company. It can be very, very costly. At the other side, what I see is also a trend in edge AI, which means that next to the cloud, so offline on a very small device mostly. So for example, if we have an IoT connected camera, that certain AI algorithms are running on that camera, and only the results of the AI model will be transferred to the cloud. So both on terms of what you need to transmit over the wireless networks and what you need to store in the cloud is much cheaper. But of course, you have less computational power, so it's a balance that you need to take. But it's a common trend now, and you'll see a lot of things happening there.
Okay, great. Yeah, EdgeAI is something our last expert class
sure.
will cover.
They're
with
coming
edge
right
on.
after.
Yeah, perfect. So that's something to look forward for after this one. Okay, great. And then also the most important thing I think for AI startup is, like you mentioned, the data they're using, and you already mentioned like one tool, one of the applicants at imec right now, Raymond.ai, for cleaning the data, but of course they're still a young company. Are there already more mature tools readily available for startups to start using to clean their data and annotate it better?
There is quite a lot of tools for cleaning their data and setting up AI structures and setting up a data structure. That's already available, but not so much on the longer term. So they don't look at the constant health check.
More of a one-off shot.
Yeah, and if, for example, if something goes wrong in your AI pipeline, so for example, you feed the wrong image, or your camera has fallen off and is looking at the wrong angle, and your AI model is just a bit confused then. But you need to know that it's your camera that's behaving rarely or doing something wrong. So I think that the AI scene is still a bit nascent and is still a bit young, and there need to be more platforms to behave professionally on a bigger scale. Now the AI projects are primarily small individual things. It's not a very big scalable product yet, and I think we need additional tools and platforms for that.
That's something for the future, or maybe for one of the startups listening.
Yeah, maybe that's a good example.
But the mechanical Turk you mentioned, the random Mexican guy, that's not something just the regular Joe can use, or is that something only for Amazon products?
No, that's just one example, and Amazon is of course they coined the term mechanical Turk, which makes a good story to tell. But a number of those crowd tasking platforms are being used and exist, and it's from our Western world, it's a bit rare to see that someone would spend 15 minutes to earn 20 cents. But it's somewhere else and some parts of the world, it makes sense and it's worthwhile to invest your time. But you would think that AI systems, even from the bigger players like Tesla and Uber, would all be fully automatic, but that's not the case. Every difficult case is being forwarded to engineers or data scientists or crowd tasking platforms to help the AI system.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yep, it's a choice you make. Do I spend 1 hour on TikTok, or do I spend 1 hour
True.
on cleaning data? Okay, great. And then, yeah, of course, the main topic of the session, the challenges AI startups face. You already mentioned some, but are there some, general guidelines? What are, startups starting out right now? What do they need to look for? What are some the key takeaways, the key things they need to make sure they have set in place before they start out?
Yeah, and first of all, although I have a technical background, I have a commercial focus. So it's always best.
It's always important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always best to have a validation of what you're trying to build, no matter what. It doesn't make sense to build a product without knowing that somebody will buy it. So that's why I think it's important to bootstrap your business or even fake your product, especially in the early phase, before you do big investments. Once you have some validation from the market, I do think that you need to spend a lot of money and I think you need to spend some money and need to dare to invest in your technical team, in your technical infrastructure, etc. So
in your analysis, like you mentioned.
Yeah. So if you do like MLOps and you don't have any expertise in that, or you need some freelancer to do that, but if you all try it yourself, it will horribly fail probably. So I would suggest ask for the right expertise. Is it via universities? Is it agencies, or get somebody, an employee, into your team? It doesn't really matter in the short term, but you'll need additional expertise. It's not that easy as it seems from the outside.
No, of course not. Yeah, it's a great learning school to start out on your own, but it's difficult to commercialize.
Yeah, and everybody can write their first AI model and write their first AI system, and a lot of data is available online. But to go to the next step, to go to something in production, it's a very big step.
Yeah, of course. No, great, interesting. And then also something really difficult, like you mentioned, the IP issue. There are a lot of open source data points and databases already available, like the OpenAI one.
Yep.
That's one of the biggest players, of course. Is it most interesting to start using those ones to train your network, or is it even possible to go out as a small startup to go gathering your own data?
It's a good way to start, but I think what's more efficient is what we see in terms of like, for example, synthetic media or generating your own data. So if you can have some parameters on what kind of data there is. You take, for example, one picture and you can make 1,000 variations of that computationally, then it's your own data. And you have a lot of data that's under your control. And that makes a lot of sense. And then you don't only need to use what's publicly available, but every AI system is using. But I would suggest to use validated data. So use less data, but correct data. Make sure that you have ground truth. and then it will probably yield results.
Yeah, of course. Okay, no, some great tips over there. And also, next to yeah, if you're starting out, like I mentioned, make sure you do a grid analysis. But do you also see the a thing they call like, yeah, do they need to use the word AI? Do they more use it as a buzzword instead of using real AI technology? Is that something you usually you encounter a lot when companies are, for example, applying for
Yeah,
imec start?
of course it makes sense because startups need a lot of money and investors have like a weakness for the term AI. So it's and for part they're correct because AI is exciting because it's solving problems that couldn't be solved before. So it's opening doors, but it's being mentioned a bit too much, and it's everybody needs AI. It's like I'm an accountant and I need AI to improve things, but it doesn't make sense. And if we evaluate startup applications at imec.istart, and especially me personally, and if I see too many buzzwords, I just it's a cutoff for me because it undermines your story. If it helps your case, please use it all you can do, but otherwise it's a negative effect.
Yeah, if in the end you don't really have a good grasp of what are you now actually making or doing, what's your service, then it's of course a bummer.
Yeah, true.
Okay, great, interesting. And also, like you mentioned, you have the technical aspect, but the human aspect is more than important when building AI or any product in general. What are some common mistakes over there in the team itself? I mean, what kind of structures do you need to facilitate? Which foundations do you need to have in the team? Like you mentioned, the right hires, of course, is one thing.
Yeah.
But the structures in the team itself, of course.
Well, it's a bit difficult in AI because it's
Still
for most cases it's a black box. So it's an evolving environment, but it's also a bit of a black box. So it's not like in normal software you have one lead software engineer revising the code and knowing what's happening. But in AI, it's semi-automatic or fully automatic.
You can revise the data, but you can't really revise the model.
So you can look at the accuracy, but that's afterwards, or you can look at the data. How if there's something wrong with that, do we have enough data? But the most important part is the model itself, where the computation happens. Mostly that's a black box, and that's something that I would suggest looking into, is that it's a more explainable AI, and that's also a research topic in a lot of universities, to explain what the steps are and to intervene in certain steps in the process of
certain milestones.
Yeah, and so that you have some grasp of what's happening, because otherwise it's just a black box, and if you want to base your entire product and business on a black box, it can be a bit dangerous to do that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you have what is it now again? The 80-20 rule, like 80% of the data to train your model and 20 to test it in the end. But yeah, in the end, it's still a black box, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And so transparency to your own team, but also to the end user, I think is very important to let them know why a certain result is coming up.
Definitely for your clients as well.
Yeah, and that's something that some startups are struggling with. Because if we look at a factory and you have a computer vision system that's looking at, for example, parts that are being manufactured and and try to determine what the wrong parts are, you'll have to signal a certain blue collar worker there in the factory. How do you do that? And do they trust you enough? Do you need an explanation, or just signaling there is something wrong? And then you have engineers trying to address a human aspect of the business, which is not always easy to do.
Not ideal.
Yeah, two different worlds actually.
Yeah, no, of course. Okay, great, interesting. Yeah, see, our time is almost up. I had one last question.
Yeah, sure.
When is Skynet taking over the world?
Personally, I'm not so fond of the big ideas of Skynet taking over the world. If you look at what AI is capable of doing now, I'm not too worried.
Okay,
There's
great.
still a lot of boundaries, and we're not out of our jobs yet.
Not yet. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing that it's still such
It
a
can
young
do a lot,
technology.
but don't worry too much.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Robby, for all the explanation and your insights. Really interesting to
You're
learn
welcome.
more. And like you mentioned, definitely keep an eye out for the deadline to apply for imec.istart, the 1st of June, right?
1st of June.
1st of June. Okay,
Sure.
great. Next up, we have a short break right now, but then we'll jump over into our next expert class of Accenture, right? And they'll show us their digital twin, which will be really interesting. See you later.